On Friday, we sat down with Republican Mike Kelly and Democrat Jason Crow, the leaders of the bipartisan congressional task force investigating the assassination attempts on former President Trump. We wanted to know what they learned about the challenges facing the Secret Service when it comes to keeping protectees safe.
The area that I, in particular, looked at was the culture of the organization, because I was struck by the stories in the recount of the specific actions of officers and agents on the ground that day. And there were some heroic ones, but there were also a lot of examples of people that knew that something was wrong and they didn't say anything.
Yeah. Why didn't anyone say anything? Were they unaware of vulnerabilities, or is there a culture of silence where people speaking up get smacked down for doing so?
That is my concern, is that there's a culture of silence and that individual officers and agents are not empowered to say something is wrong.
Congressman Kelly, on that point, I mean, some of this sounds like Management 101, that this is not specific to the Secret Service. A lot of organizations have problems like what you just highlighted there. Acting Director Rowe testified Thursday. He thinks the Secret Service needs to identify leaders earlier on and promote them based on ability, not just hours logged on the clock.
But isn't that true of everything in life? When you look at this, when people talk about we need better leadership, I was on those grounds the night before. They weren't set up at that point. They were going to work through the night to get it ready. And then you find out afterwards that there was no coordination. There was no team meeting. There was no, this is going to be your responsibility to know where you're supposed to be and what time you're supposed to be there. You bring local law enforcement in, but you don't include them in the planning, or when you do the interviews afterwards, well, I thought he was going to do it. No, we thought somebody else was going to do it. When you knew there was a suspicious person on the grounds, and this is a common going back and forth. Now, this is where it said they were communicating with each other. You can't tell me that you didn't know till 10 minutes after 6 that you couldn't communicate. At 11 minutes after 6, the shooter took action. They knew an hour and a half ahead of time, out of all the thousands of the people walking around on that property, there was a suspicious person. And they kept losing sight of him. I would have said, and I have no background in law enforcement, keep the president back until we clear the area. That's the part that doesn't make sense, because they failed from the first thing, from the picking of the site, to preparing the site, to the coordination of the site, to the ability to communicate. At every step of the way, they failed. And the question is, why didn't you just say, hold up, just hold up, don't let him come out?
Well, when the acting director says, on Thursday of this week, we need to pick better leaders, that would suggest that the agency today does not necessarily have the leaders it needs to fix all the things you just laid out.
Yeah, and I think by saying what he said, that's what he meant. They don't have the leadership they need. When they morphed them into Homeland Security back in 2001, whenever it was, they took away their identity and their exclusivity. When you're the best of the best, when you're the elite of the elites, if you lose that, then all of a sudden you just become part of a team. There was a huge mistake back when Homeland came into existence. That's not a criticism, because they did what they had to do back then. But I'm telling you, on July 13th, there was a lack of professionalism. There was a lack of concern. There was a lack of coordination. And the ability to communicate is the one thing I'll never understand. You knew you couldn't talk to each other. Why did you go forward?
I want to be really clear that there are plenty of extraordinary agents and officers in the Secret Service, right? When we talk about a failure of mission, in Butler or any place else, that doesn't mean that 80, 90% of the Secret Service agents aren't phenomenal and dedicated professionals. But there is a systematic problem here. The structure, the personnel, the staffing of the Secret Service hasn't changed in years, at the same time as we are now asking them to do things that they didn't do a decade ago. And they are fulfilling an operational tempo that requires them to be deployed 3 weeks out of a month, constantly doing events, skipping firearms training, skipping leadership development training. We are not developing their skills and their training, and I think you see the results of that.
So you made 36 recommendations in this report on what to change, including to reduce the number of protectees. Right now, the Secret Service protects not only presidential leadership, their immediate families, their spouses, their children, candidates, and anyone really the president designates. Should all of that continue?
We've increased the size of protectees that are out there, including foreign assets that come here and people to bring their families and things. So that's gotten so big But if you look at Homeland, I think when you look at Secret Service, it's about 3% of their overall spend. The biggest spend is on FEMA. And we know we don't want to change anything like that. But you can't have an exclusive without funding them to the level that they need to be funded, not only in manpower and in training, but in the assets that they have to have available to them.
You always have to ask yourself, what are your missions? And what is the thing that only you can do? Like, what is that no-fail mission? In this case, with the Secret Service, that no-fail mission is to protect our highest level candidates and our highest level elected officials, period. All the other things, investigation of financial crimes, training and support, these are all secondary missions. So if you're not actually adequately performing any of those missions to standard, and if you've reached a breaking point, then it's time to assess what are those missions that need to fall off and to be transitioned elsewhere. That's my view.
You, Congressman Crow, seem very frustrated based on the report and hearing.
Do I seem frustrated?
I know you're very good.
Well, with the fact that you couldn't find out more about the shooter, both in Butler and in the potential shooter in Mar-a-Lago.
That's actually a really important element to the story, and people have rightful questions about it. I have questions about it, and that is, why did the shooter do this? What drove him to do it? Was he a lone wolf shooter? Did he have associates or affiliates? What was his motivation? How was he radicalized? We endeavored to get answers to those questions. We submitted numerous requests to the Department of Justice and FBI. Their response is, this is an ongoing criminal investigation, and we can't give that information to Congress. That, in my view, is an unacceptable position, and here's why.
For both Butler and Mar-a-Lago, that was
Correct.
the answer.
That's right. And here's why that's unacceptable. I sit on the Intelligence Committee, I've sat on the Armed Services Committee, and Congress all the time gets access to our nation's most sensitive secrets. Ongoing operations, intelligence operations, military operations. You can't tell me that there isn't a way to put us into a secure facility and get us information about an ongoing criminal investigation when I regularly am receiving briefs on what our spies and our military special operators are doing regularly around the world. So none of this stands to reason, and we have dedicated ourselves to continue to get those answers. And if the FBI and DOJ thinks that they can wait us out and stonewall us, they are wrong.
You think they're intentionally withholding information?
I don't know what their intention is. I mean, I'm not a mind reader, but you know, I've been around Congress long enough to know what people do when you get stonewalled. I mean, listen, this is not uncommon.
No.
When you're dealing with agencies and departments, it's a pretty regular method, and it's something that, you know, we encounter all the time in our oversight responsibilities.
So we don't know, or tell me if perhaps you know the answer. Was there a foreign nexus? Do we know, yes or no?
Americans are deluged with misinformation and disinformation that's coming from a variety of sources. And conspiracy theories sometimes take root when there's a lack of information or there's conflicting information. So our job is to try to get information out there, to be transparent, to be accessible, to tell the real story. And that's why this is important. This element of that story is important, because there's a lot of conspiracies around these shootings, right? And we take that seriously. We want to you know, rebuff those. But you know, in this case, and I sit on a lot of other committees with access to information, I have seen no evidence that a state actor, an adversary, was responsible for either of these attempted assassination attempts. I have seen no evidence. But, you know, when you're in a position where, you know, the government says, well, it's not this, but we won't tell you what it is, right? And we can't tell you definitively. Well, you know, people respond and have questions about that. And I understand that mentality. So even though we don't have evidence of one thing, people still want to know what else it is. And I still want to know what else it is.
Did he act alone? Do we know that?
We don't know that.
Or Congress doesn't know that?
Yeah, and you know, it's one thing to say, and I'm going to be really clear about this, because this is very, very sensitive territory, because we want to make sure we're not, you know, getting people spun up unnecessarily. There is no evidence from other sources, you know, internal government sources, from our investigation, that others were involved, that he acted with others, and that a foreign state or adversary was involved in this. But that still raises the question of, why did he do this? Was he just a disturbed young man who decided to take action alone? Probably. I mean, that's probably the answer.
It looks like now. Yeah.
Right? That's what it looks like. But we need to know, right? And let's get the information out there that the government has to make sure that we can settle this. And that's our obligation.
Is the agency today able to do its job if they weren't able to do it in July?
We were tasked with trying to find out what happened that day, why it happened that day, and to the best of our ability, make sure that the Secret Service, that doesn't happen again to them. We can't guarantee that these things won't happen because it's a crazy world right now. But there was too much ahead of time that we did know, that we didn't share. I would never let my child play near a road. And when you do, you put people at jeopardy of that, and you know there's a danger there. Don't let it happen.
Is there anything that you feel important to raise that we didn't talk about?
We never identified as Republicans and Democrats. We defined as a task force to find out what happened that day. And the whole goal from day one is to restore the faith and trust and confidence that the American people must have in this agency. At this point, it's probably at the lowest ebb it's ever been. And the other thing is, I think we realize that threats are 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. You can't take a day off. You can't take a play off. You've got to be ready every single moment for anything that could possibly happen. Is that a difficult task? Yes. Is it almost impossible? Yes. There's a lot of bad actors out there. But you know what's not impossible? Our dedication to the fact that we're going to do the best we can do every single day to ensure that the American people have the faith and trust and confidence they must have in us.
This is a tough place to work. And there are, frankly, there are some people here that don't belong here, that I think are just here to get attention, to get clicks on social media, that are here to legislate. But this has been one of the best experiences of my time in Congress, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner than Mike Kelly. And he's a very conservative Republican, and I'm a Democrat. We're both proud of that. We're proud of our politics, and we represent our districts, right? That's actually the job, right? We represent the culture and the politics and the hopes and dreams of our districts, and that's what's so beautiful about this place when it works well. But this process, and I think this is really important for Americans to understand, this process was serious. It was bipartisan. It was deep, and we did the job that we were asked to do.
You can watch our full interview on our website and our YouTube page. We'll be right back. A panel of federal judges in D.C. last week upheld a new law that could effectively ban the popular social media app TikTok by mid-January if its Chinese owners do not sell it to a new buyer. Frank McCourt, the executive chairman of McCourt Global and founder of Project Liberty, is one of the potential buyers, and he joins us now. Good to see you here.
Good morning.
So TikTok says, well, they might go to the Supreme Court on this one. If they don't, their parent company, ByteDance, has said they're not interested in selling. Do you have any indication that they will, and that the incoming Trump administration would support someone like you buying it?
Well, yeah, I think where we are now, Margaret, is there's three options. One is an appeal. Our lawyers tell us there's very little chance of a successful appeal by ByteDance. Strong bipartisan legislation, a 3-0 vote by the appellate court. So now that leaves us with two: a ban or a sale. We don't want to see it banned. I'd add that President-elect Trump has also said he doesn't want to see it banned. So now let's talk about the sale. So we've been working for the last 8 months on the assumption that the legislation would be upheld and that there would be a sale. So that's where we are right now. And we're working very, very hard to be in a position to buy the U.S. portion of TikTok so it's not shut down.
So what is that worth to you? There are estimates it could be as high as $200 billion in worth.
$200 billion would be more in the range of what the entirety of the platform is worth, not just a U.S. piece. And let's be clear, the Chinese government has said they're not selling the algorithm. They view that as IP of the country. So U.S. TikTok is a piece of ByteDance. If it's sold, it will be sold without an algorithm, so the value will be far, far less than $200 billion. We have circled over $20 billion to be in a position, and we're very serious about raising whatever capital is required to buy the platform. And to be clear, we're looking to move the 170 million users over to a new protocol where the individuals will own and control their identity and their data. We're not looking to replicate the existing version.
So let's talk about that. As you said, 170 million Americans use TikTok, especially young people. U.S. law prohibits foreign control of mass media, but this social media space is kind of a loophole here. There aren't a lot of governing rules in this space. Do you think Congress needs to write new rules of the road to ban foreign ownership and to put restrictions on even owners like you?
I think we need to upgrade our regulations and our policies. There's no doubt about that. But far more importantly, we need to fix the technology. The internet is broken, fundamentally broken. We heard your guest earlier, Representative Turner, talk about the threat from China on our telecom hack. Massive hack, massive threat to Americans.
And they're still in the telecom system, according to U.S.
Absolutely. And we heard your recent guests, Representative Kelly and Crow, talk about the deluge of misinformation and disinformation, the fact that it's a very dangerous world right now. The reason why the Congress moves so quickly with TikTok to pass the legislation is because it is a national security threat to Americans. And the reason why the judges upheld it is for that same reason. So let's turn a problem into a solution by taking advantage of this moment, move the 170 million users over to a new protocol where individuals are respected.
Do you have an indication from President-elect Trump that he wants to see an American entity buy this? Because he would also have some influence in the outcome.
Of course, as president-elect, he'll have massive influence.
Have you spoken to him?
But President Trump is a deal maker. We know that. I'm a deal maker. Okay, I've been doing business deals my entire life. Let's make a deal where everybody wins, where China's able to sell the U.S. portion of TikTok, where American citizens are protected, and where there's 170 million users continue to enjoy the platform. So he has said he doesn't want it banned, which means a sale. And the legislation and the appellate decision require that this platform be owned by Americans. We have built a clean, bottom-up American stack to move this user base over where there'll be no Chinese backdoors and no ability to take advantage of American citizens.
You're indicating you've built out some technology, you think, that will not allow for government surveillance.
Correct.
But can you, whoever owns this is going to be powerful. If you get 170 million Americans on a platform, particularly young people, to consume the information on this system. So what guarantees do you make? Because Facebook and Twitter, they also harvest information about consumers.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we don't want to do. So the reason why we want to move people to a new stack where you can't harvest without permission. So individuals will own and control their identity and their data, permission its use, will actually have an internet that respects people as opposed to exploits them. Imagine empowering people. And to be clear, Margaret, I'm not looking to be the CEO of TikTok. We call it the people's bid because we want this to empower people and to stop this nonsense where we're exploiting people by scraping their data and taking advantage of them. And in the case of TikTok, actually creating a national security threat.
Elon Musk, who owns X, formerly known as Twitter now, has raised concerns about content moderation restricting free speech. Do you share that concern? And what restrictions would you put on paid political advertising?
I mentioned earlier that we need better policies for sure, but we need better tech. Right now, we have a tech stack that's built, and these giant apps scrape our data and exploit it. Why not flip the power? Why not actually give people their data back? Our data is our personhood in this age. Let us decide how to use it. Let us each decide what moderation we're comfortable with, what censorship we're comfortable with, what privacy we're comfortable with.
Okay, so the Surgeon General says you need a warning label because this is damaging the mental health of young people in this country. Should people under the age of 16 have access?
Yeah, under the current tech stack, I agree with the Surgeon General. Under a new technology, I'm a builder. My family's been building for 5 generations. This is an engineering problem that can be fixed. Let's take this ban of TikTok, this massive national security problem, and turn it into a solution for Americans. Let's make it a win, a win-win.
Yeah. Well, mid-January, we will see what happens in this case, and we will watch your potential bid here. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back in a moment. The week-long ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon appears to be holding, but the situation in Gaza remains dire. Here's our Deborah Pata reporting from East Jerusalem.
A massive Israeli strike caught on camera by CBS News as it ripped through the Al-Mawasi tented camp near Khan Yunis. A designated humanitarian safe zone turned into a blazing inferno. Faced with unpredictable danger, exhausted families on the move again. Israel says it was targeting 2 Hamas militants, but over 20 people died, among them 4 children and a pregnant woman. In central Gaza, 13-year-old Shadi Faraj was playing outside when he was killed. This is proof of their crimes, his Aunt Mona shouted. They just want to kill as many Palestinians as possible. In northern Gaza, Israel has ordered everyone to leave. It is under siege. Even as Palestinians flee, they are shot at. Israel has allowed virtually no aid into the north for more than 2 months. In the south, this is what it looks like outside the few remaining bakeries as people fight just for a piece of bread. Every morning, 11-year-old Zaina Juha braved those crowds until one day she did not come home. She had been trampled to death. The world looks at us and all they see are terrorists, her father Ahmed told us. We're not terrorists. We just want to survive. But no one, it seems, is listening as hunger spreads everywhere. Amnesty International says there is no time to waste and has warned the US to stop sending weapons to Israel because of the likelihood, Margaret, that these would be used for war crimes or genocide.
That was our Deborah Pata in East Jerusalem. We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.